Okay, let's jump right into this deep dive on 1 Samuel chapter 14. It's really quite something.
It really is. Action-packed, full of, well, faith and some questionable decisions, too. We're looking at Israel versus the Philistines again.
And the key players are King Saul, his son Jonathan, and surprisingly, an oath that causes a lot of drama.
Exactly. But the action, interestingly, kicks off with Jonathan, Saul's son. He decides to take his armor-bearer and just go straight towards a Philistine outpost. And the crucial thing, the text makes a point of this, he doesn't tell his father, Saul.
Right, so Saul has no idea this is happening. Where is Saul then while his son is off on this secret mission?
Saul's actually camped on the outskirts of Gibeah, under a pomegranate tree, the text says, in a place called Migron.
Okay.
And he's got about 600 men with him. Plus Ahijah, the priest, is there, wearing the ephod.
Ahijah, wasn't he descended from Eli?
That's right. The source mentions his lineage traces back to Eli, the priest at Shiloh, which, given the history there, is quite a detail.
So Saul is with the main force, priest included, probably thinking about strategy, completely unaware.
Totally oblivious.
Right.
Meanwhile, Jonathan and his armor-bearer are heading for this Philistine position.
And it's not an easy target, is it, this outpost?
No, not at all. It's in a pass, described as having these two sharp cliffs, Bozez on one side, towards Michmash, and Seneh on the other, facing Jeba, a natural defensive position.
So what's Jonathan thinking? Just him and one other guy against an outpost? That sounds bold, maybe reckless.
Well, his reasoning is pure faith. He literally says to his armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised fellows."
Okay.
And then he says this, "Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few."
Wow, that's putting everything on the line, based entirely on faith in God's power.
It is. He's completely focused on God's ability, not the military odds, and the armor-bearer. He's immediately on board.
Like you say.
Something like, "Do all that you have in mind. Go ahead. I am with you heart and soul." Incredible loyalty there.
So they have this pact, this shared mission, and they have a plan, right? A way to know if God is actually in this.
Yes, a specific sign. They'll show themselves to the Philistines down below. If the Philistines shout, "Wait there until we come to you," they'll hold back.
But
But if the Philistines yell, "Come up to us," that's the signal. Jonathan decides that will mean the Lord has given them into Israel's hand.
okay, so the plan is set. They reveal themselves. What happens?
The Philistines see them, just two guys, and they're scornful. They shout, "Look, the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they were hiding in."
Classic taunting.
Right.
But did they give the sign?
They did. They yelled, "Come up to us and we'll teach you a lesson."
That's it. The signal.
Exactly. Jonathan turns to his armor-bearer and says, "Climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." Game on.
They have to climb up these steep cliffs, it sounds like.
Yes, the text says using his hands and feet, so it was a difficult climb. Jonathan goes first, his armor-bearer right behind him.
And the attack itself, just two men storming an outpost.
It's incredibly effective initially. They kill about 20 Philistines in a very small area, maybe half an acre. Jonathan strikes them down. The armor-bearer finishes them off.
20 men. That's significant for just two attackers. But surely that doesn't rout the whole army.
No, but what happens next is key. It's not just the local outpost that reacts. The text says panic struck the whole army.
The whole army? How?
It spread through the camp, the soldiers in the field, even the raiding parties out elsewhere. And the source is very clear about the cause.
What does it say?
It says it was a panic sent by God. And it adds, the ground shook. So it suggests a supernatural element, an earthquake maybe, amplifying the fear caused by Jonathan's attack.
Divine intervention causing mass chaos.
Precisely. Jonathan's faith was the spark, but God fanned it into a wildfire of panic among the Philistines.
So, back with Saul, his lookouts must have seen this commotion, right? The Philistine army just falling apart.
Absolutely. They see the Philistine forces melting away, moving in confusion. Saul immediately realizes something is up. His first reaction is to muster his troops.
To figure out who's missing.
Yes, to see who initiated this. And sure enough, they discover Jonathan and his armor-bearer are gone.
What does Saul do then? Does he consult God? He has the priest right there.
He starts to. He tells Ahijah, the priest, "Bring the ark of God here." But then as the noise and confusion from the Philistine camp gets louder and louder,
He changes his mind.
yes, he tells Ahijah, "Withdraw your hand." Basically, never mind, there's no time. The battle is escalating too quickly.
So instead of waiting for God's guidance through the ark, he just charges in with his men.
He does. He and his 600 men join the battle. And what they find is pure chaos.
The Philistines are fighting each other.
Exactly. The source says they were in utter confusion, striking each other with their swords. The panic God sent had turned them against themselves.
And then others start joining the Israelite side.
Right. First, there were Hebrews who had been, for some reason, serving with the Philistines. They saw what was happening and switched sides, joining Saul and Jonathan. And then all the Israelites who had been hiding out in the hill country of Ephraim, terrified of the Philistines, they hear that the enemy is running, and they come pouring out to join the pursuit.
So the momentum completely shifts. It's a rout.
A total rout. The narrative sums it up. So the Lord rescued Israel that day. The victory is explicitly credited to God. The battle moves past Beth Aven as the Israelites pursue.
A great victory. But then Saul makes a decision. An oath.
Yes, and this is where things get really complicated and, frankly, detrimental. Amidst this victory, Saul imposes a harsh oath on the army.
What was the oath?
He says, "Cursed be any man who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies."
Before he has avenged himself. Interesting phrasing, but the effect on the troops.
Immediate and negative. The text states clearly, none of the troops tasted food. All day, fighting, pursuing, and eating nothing.
They must have been exhausted.
The word used is faint. Utterly drained, which, isn't exactly peak fighting condition.
And this sets the stage for Jonathan's problem, because he wasn't there when the oath was made.
Precisely. He's separated from the main group. As the weary army moves through some woods later, they find honey, just dripping, right there on the ground.
A quick energy source, perfect for faint soldiers.
You'd think so. But the men are terrified because of Saul's curse. No one put his hand to his mouth, the text says. They're obeying the oath, even though they're suffering.
But Jonathan doesn't know.
He has no idea.
Yeah.
He sees the honey, dips the end of his staff in a honeycomb, and eats some.
And the effect.
Instantaneous. His eyes brightened, it says. He feels revived, gets that energy boost.
And then someone tells him.
Yes, one of the soldiers sees him and explains, "Hey, your father put the army under a strict oath not to eat. That's why everyone's so faint."
How does Jonathan react to learning about his father's command?
He's critical immediately. He says, "My father has made trouble for the country."
Strong words against the king?
Very. He points to his own experience. "Look how revived I am from just a little honey." He argues that if the men had eaten some of the enemy's plunder earlier, they would have been stronger.
And potentially killed even more Philistines.
That's his point exactly, how much greater the slaughter of the Philistines would have been, he says. So Saul's oath, meant perhaps to focus them, actually hampered the victory.
So the day ends, the pursuit is over for now, the men are starving. What happens next?
Well, they're beyond exhausted and famished. They fall upon the plunder, they captured sheep, cattle, calves.
Finally getting some food.
Yes, but in their desperation and haste, they start butchering the animals right there on the ground and eating the meat together with the blood.
Uh-oh. That's a major issue in Jewish law, right?
A huge issue. The law strictly forbids eating meat with the blood still in it. It's seen as a serious sin against God.
Does Saul find out?
Someone reports it to him. "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that has blood in it."
How does Saul react to this problem?
He calls them out. "You have broken faith." But then he acts decisively to stop the sin.
What does he do?
He orders a large stone to be rolled over. He tells the men, "Bring your animals here, slaughter them properly on this stone, drain the blood, then eat. Do not sin by eating meat with blood."
So he provides a solution, a proper place for slaughter.
Yes, and the text notes that everyone complied that night. They brought their animals and prepared them correctly.
And after dealing with this crisis, Saul does something significant.
He builds an altar to the Lord, and the text specifically points out it was the first time he had done this.
Interesting that his first recorded altar comes after this incident, prompted by the need to rectify the people's sin, not exactly proactive leadership.
It does seem reactive, doesn't it? A response to a problem caused, indirectly perhaps, by his own earlier oath, leading to extreme hunger.
Right, so the immediate crisis is averted, but Saul's not done with the Philistines.
Not at all. He proposes, "Let's go down after the Philistines tonight. Let's pursue them until dawn and not leave one man alive."
He wants total annihilation. What does the army say?
They seem too tired to argue, or maybe just deferential. They say, "Do whatever seems best to you."
But the priest steps in again, Ahijah.
Presumably Ahijah, yes. He provides that crucial spiritual check. Let us inquire of God here. Before you go charging off again, let's see what God says.
So Saul agrees to inquire. What does he ask?
He asks God two specific questions. "Shall I go down after the Philistines, Will you give them into Israel's hand?
Straightforward questions. What's the answer?
Silence. Complete silence. The source states very clearly. But God did not answer him that day.
Oof. After seeing God act so powerfully earlier, that silence must have been deafening.
Absolutely. And Saul immediately interprets it as a sign of divine displeasure. He concludes there must be unaddressed sin in the camp from that day's events.
And his reaction is extreme again.
Extremely. He declares to all the leaders, as surely as the Lord who rescues Israel lives, even if the guilt lies with my son Jonathan, he must die.
Wow. He invokes God's name in an oath to execute the unknown sinner, explicitly including his own son as a possibility.
Yes. And the initial reaction from the men? Silence. Not one of the men said a word. They likely sense where this is going, given Jonathan ate the honey.
How does Saul plan to find the guilty party?
By casting lots. A method used then to discern divine will. He sets it up. Saul and Jonathan on one side, all the rest of the troops on the other.
And the lot falls on?
Saul and Jonathan's side. The people are cleared, so the sin lies between the king and his son.
Then he casts lots again, just between himself and Jonathan.
And the lot falls on Jonathan. He is identified as the cause of God's silence.
Saul confronts him directly.
Yes. Tell me what you have done, he demands.
And Jonathan confesses.
Yeah, he does, straightforwardly. I merely tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now must I die. He doesn't deny it, just states the simple act and the disproportionate consequence.
Does Saul relent, seeing it was a minor, unknowing infraction by the hero of the day?
Not one bit. He doubles down on his vow. He swears another oath. May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan. He seems trapped by his own words, prioritizing his oath over his son, over justice, maybe even over common sense.
This feels like a critical moment. Is anyone going to stop this?
Yes. This is where the army, the people, finally speak up forcefully.
What do they say?
They challenge Saul directly. Should Jonathan die, they ask, he who has brought about this great deliverance in Israel? They remind Saul of Jonathan's heroic and decisive role in the victory.
They're defending the one who actually won the battle for them.
Exactly. And they make a powerful theological point, too. They declare, as surely as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground, for he did this today with God's help.
Ah, so they're saying Jonathan's action wasn't just brave, it was divinely aided. Punishing him would be like punishing someone God helped.
That's the implication. They recognize God's hand in Jonathan's success, contrasting sharply with Saul's rigid adherence to his own flawed oath.
And does their intervention work? Does Saul back down?
He does. The text says, so the men rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. The collective voice of the army, appealing to justice and God's evident blessing on Jonathan, overrides the king's decree.
A remarkable turnaround. The community saves the individual hero from the flawed leader.
It really is. After this intense confrontation, Saul calls off the pursuit of the Philistines for good, and they withdraw.
The chapter then kind of zooms out, right? Gives us a summary of Saul's reign.
Yeah, it offers a broader perspective. It lists the enemies he fought throughout his reign. Moab, Ammon, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and especially the Philistines. It says he fought valiantly and inflicted punishment.
It also mentions his family, doesn't it?
It does. His sons are listed Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua. His daughters, Merab and Michal. His wife, Ahinoam. And his army commander, Abner, who was Saul's uncle. It fills in some background.
And it notes something about his recruitment strategy.
Yes, that whenever Saul saw a mighty or brave man, he took him into his service, building a standing army.
But it ends by reiterating the main conflict of his time.
Right back to the central struggle. All the days of Saul there was bitter war with the Philistines. That was the defining feature of his kingship.
So, reflecting on this whole chapter, it's just packed with contrast. Jonathan's bold faith versus Saul's reactive, oath-driven leadership.
You see God's clear intervention bringing victory, but then his silence forcing a confrontation with sin. You see the army suffer under a bad rule, sin because of it, but then act righteously to save Jonathan.
It really puts leadership under the microscope, doesn't it? Especially the weight of words like Saul's oaths and their unintended, potentially devastating consequences.
Absolutely. And it shows the complex interplay between human initiative, like Jonathan's, divine action, and the community's role in discernment and even correction.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Particularly about those vows. Considering everything that happened here, the distress, the new execution of the hero, what does this narrative really suggest about making absolute unbreakable vows, especially under pressure or in the heat of conflict?
That's the question, isn't it?
Is there a place for wisdom and flexibility, even when you've made a solemn promise? This chapter certainly gives you a lot to chew on regarding that.